Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to a new season of the New Age Tour Guide podcast. If this is your first encounter with me, I'm Trish Murray, and this podcast is really about sharing content and creative ways of navigating these age-changing times. And that becomes a threshold for some listeners. Are you seeing or feeling the cultural, social, economic, political landscapes shifting? If you aren't sure how to make sense of what's happening in our world right now, season 1 might be of benefit to you. I draw on a variety of viewpoints with the intention of broadening our perspective and creating a different level of awareness around what's transpiring in the outside world, the external circumstances of our life on planet Earth. I draw from astrology and psychology, and I even tune into some of the most compelling ideas that I've found that have been pointing to the possibility that humanity is moving through a really significant turning point. But in season 2, I'm going to bring you into new thresholds. I'm going to use a specific framework developed by Dr. David Hawkins, the map of consciousness. And I'm going to combine that with examples and insights and stories from my own Eat, Pray, Love journey, and share a little bit about how I think we can shift and anchor new levels of consciousness and find our way to truly thrive in this new age. Now, moving with the spirit of this new age of authenticity, let me say that I'm not a coach and I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. I don't profess to have all or any of the answers. I'm not using this podcast, or my Substack channel for that matter, to monetize products or services or to sell programs or courses. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things. You will probably have the best experience, though, if you engage with what I share from an understanding that this space is a place where I'm fostering my own creative expression. It's a space that I've dedicated for myself to share ideas and theories that I'm working with, inspirations and insights that I'm gathering from a wide array of directions, and where I'm testing what it is to live as a sovereign soul. In season 2, I created a series of conversations that are really designed to be perennial in nature. And what I mean by that is that it's my hope that they will be enduring. They will be timeless in some sense, and that they will be relevant for people at multiple points through this collective evolution that we're engaged with right now. Season 2 focuses primarily on the pure power of intentionally raising our consciousness. And I speak candidly about key influences that I've found that are blocking or derailing our progress. Influences like the media, the marketing, and high-profile messengers, which I describe as the Matrix. Throughout season 2, I also share examples from my own journey in the last, say, 10 or 15 years about how these influences really showed up for me. Like how I went from being completely triggered by President Trump to cycling through the entire map of consciousness in one night after almost losing my niece's dog this summer. Each season has 9 episodes, and at this point, I plan to do 3 seasons. The first 5 minutes of each episode is video so that you can see who you're listening to and maybe give yourself a little bit of confidence that you're not tuning into something that's been AI generated. You're not. You're not. But then I intentionally shift gears and move into a pure audio podcast because the one thing that I have found to be absolutely true above all else when it comes to shifting consciousness is that we intentionally need to tune out the distractions in order to tune in order to listen for what we need to hear today. we need to be able to create some space so that we can shift our minds and prepare our hearts and listen and reconnect with our soul's voice of wisdom so that we can find truth and wisdom in the directional insights that have the most meaning for us. So let's dive in to a tour of David Hawkins' Map of Consciousness. So in my research that has shaped the soul stories of people like Steve Jobs, Mary Kay, Amelia Earhart, Louise Hay, and many more that I'm working on right now, I've found that there is a breakthrough frequency that some of these individuals were able to hold, which allowed them to create quantum leaps in both their soul growth and in the legacies that they have left behind. That frequency is courage. Now, David Hawkins was the individual who researched and revealed that 80% of the population operates at an emotional frequency less than 200. 200 is the frequency of courage. It was both humbling and disheartening for me to first discover that the vast majority of people are operating from a deeply entrenched baseline frequency of desire, anger, pride, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, or shame. If you are truly aware of the state of our world today and how quickly things are changing around the globe, politically, socially, economically, spiritually, perhaps you're not surprised at these insights that David Hawkins has shared. Or maybe it's just because you hold on to simple truths, like the principle of correspondence from the Hermetic tradition, which makes it quite clear that as within, so without. Perhaps it's no surprise to you that the state of our external world is mirroring the state of our internal worlds. Spiritual teachings have been pointing to the interconnected nature of our world for centuries, and now quantum physics is catching up to provide language that reaffirms what the ancients have been saying for a more tech-minded culture. But what I don't see or hear very many people talking about, if any, on either side, spiritual or science, is how we break through this frequency ceiling en masse. Where multiple New Age circles are talking about raising the consciousness on the planet, very few people are talking about what will shift the collective. I suppose perhaps they're relying on spirit to do that. Fair enough. But what if we are meant to be working in tandem with spirit to raise said consciousness and said collective? Wouldn't it be helpful to know what the greatest barrier to entry is? Now, probably it's beneficial to just take a little step back and even consider if there's a need to raise the collective frequency of consciousness. I mean, maybe you're okay with the majority of people moving the tide of humanity from frequencies of pride, anger, desire, fear, apathy, guilt, or shame. But likely you're not. No, I think it's fair to say that this podcast and this channel is for those who are aware that our current collective trajectory is not leading to something better. If it was, we'd be seeing that in the macro sense. I'm in Canada, and without getting immediately political, I was absolutely dumbfounded when the majority of my country voted in another 4 years of the same political policies that brought forth out of control inflation, unsustainable levels of immigration, and an erosion of personal freedoms that my grandfathers fought in 2 world wars to preserve and protect. I could care less about the party line, what it was, what it is. I just simply couldn't understand how the majority of people would vote for more of the same when the same just gave us 10 years of diminishing quality of life, increasing costs of living, less access to quality health care, and a reputation on the world stage that has marked us as pushovers or patsies. Honestly, I'd be outside my mind right now if I hadn't just spent a decade training myself to hold higher emotional frequencies than anger or fear, and learning to live beyond the illusion cast by the matrix of the media, the marketing, and the messaging. I'd be packing up to move to another country right now if I hadn't just spent untold amounts of time and energy and money learning to reconcile this quirky little thing called human behavior and making peace with this one thing that breaks through the frequency ceiling: courage. Now, I don't mean the whole elbows up bullshit illusion of courage that has put my country back in the same shit pile of political posturing and probably the ultimate fracturing of the country. I mean real courage. Given where we are in the world today, it's probably worth defining courage. So, simply put, it means possessing the ability to do something that frightens us. It's the quality of mind that enables us to encounter danger and difficulties with firmness and without fear. It's the essence of valor. It requires boldness, and it demands that we are resolved. Yeah. So how does that measure up with what you're seeing in the world? Do you see a lot of people acting with real courage? I don't, but that's beside the point because I'm not here to judge anyone for where they are or are not on the courage scale. I'm simply here to share that if we don't value what our world is becoming or the direction that the collective is taking us, there is only one quality that we need to learn to hold: courage. Now, if you watch the TV series Breaking Bad, you will have seen a compelling moral dilemma. An overqualified, dispirited high school chemistry teacher struggling with a recent diagnosis of stage 3 lung cancer turns to a life of crime to produce and distribute meth in the hopes of securing his family's financial future before he dies. Now, whatever else transpires in this show, one thing became clear to me. This was another example of how the media was intentional about blurring the lines between right and wrong, good and bad, criminal and creative. And that intention would leave you deeply unsettled or highly entertained or both. That is pretty much where we are right now. We are witnessing the almost complete breakdown of society based on carefully, methodically crafted media, marketing, and messaging campaigns delivered through a modern-day seven-headed hydra: government, health, education, business, news, religion, entertainment, and technology. Oh, I know this is probably a pretty strong start to the season, but honestly, there's no point in starting anything unless we're going to do it from a place of authenticity. Given that one perspective from last season that I shared is that we're entering the age of authenticity, I guess that's where I am now. I guess that after a million rabbit holes and just as many red pills, I feel it's more important to show up here authentically and speak about real things. I would also like to start this season with a little bit of compelling evidence that what I share here comes from my own personal experience. In other words, I can say this because I've lived this. It's been a decade since I started asking different questions, since I started challenging the status quo, since I began tearing apart the mainstream narrative, because I started to see the glitches in the matrix, the media matrix, the marketing matrix, and the high profiled polish matrix of messengers. Now, it didn't happen all at once, though I did go through the process faster than others I've encountered. I got a little bit of a warm up between 2012 and 2018 in time for the main event in 2020, but there was a pre-show for me specifically related to the past and now current President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Like I said, I had been seeing the matrix of the media, the marketing, and the messaging for close to a decade prior to all of what ensued after 2020, as I was gradually stepping my way out of the marketing industry and starting down other vocational pathways in my own spiritual awakening. But in 2019, after way too many encounters with, quote, truth, I could no longer accept the view that I had crafted around Trump during the 2016 election cycle and beyond. Now, this is probably something I'm going to return to this season because it is so relevant right now, given how many people I see caught up in the same web as I was, which some are now referring to as the Trump derangement syndrome. I won't be calling it that. I will simply be saying, if you are still finding yourself emotionally triggered by this individual, there is a very high likelihood that you are trapped in the matrix of the media, the marketing, and the messengers, all of which use all kinds of subtle and overt forms of mind control to keep people plugged in. So I think it's important to go back to 2016 so I can paint a picture of precisely where I was emotionally, mentally, spiritually, so that you might be able to see more clearly the breakthrough frequency that courage really is. First, I was still working in the marketing industry, albeit part-time, while I worked on my psychology degree. And it was actually kind of crazy, really. I was tripping over one psychological principle after another as I was tearing the industry apart in my own mind. I wasn't completely unaware of how much marketing leaned on psychology. I had read a lot of the work of William James and learned countless ways to lie with statistics when I was getting my marketing diploma. But for whatever reason, things were sharper now than in my earlier years. I chalk it up to experience, maturity, and maybe a dash of wisdom. I should also say that I have never been an American citizen. I've never voted in a US election, and the results of their political campaigns would only ever have a peripheral impact on me. Whatever the outcome in 2016, Trump versus Clinton, neither of these individuals would be my president. Yet for 18 months, the election cycle ramped up and the media went completely bananas with scandal after scandal, sordid affair after sordid affair, and lewd and illicit soundbite after soundbite. And my close colleagues, James and Justin and I, spent a disproportionate amount of time talking about Trump. Each morning, I'd come into the office, and James or Justin would pepper me with, "Did you see? Did you hear? Can you believe?" Every morning, my perspective on Trump became more and more cemented in my mind. Much the same way he is cemented in a lot of people's minds. right now. By September of 2016, I simply couldn't see a future for North America if Trump won in 2016 November, so I resolved that I would be moving to Portugal. Let that land. Essentially, I was so violently opposed to what I believed about him that I was prepared to create unnecessary volatility in my own life. And I wasn't even American. For 18 months, one word had the ability to bounce me from one emotional frequency to another, from pride to arrogance, and in the next breath, from fear to apathy. Here's what's absolutely comical to me now. I was studying psychology, and I could not see the psychological mind game being played on me. I was studying and practicing and teaching yoga, but still found a way to rationalize the caustic, callous cruelty toward a man that I had never met. Let that land. Oh, I thought I knew this guy. The media, the marketing, and the messengers, they all made sure of that. But I didn't know anything about him. I'd never met him. I didn't know one thing about his true character. I was simply so bought in on the mainstream narrative about this individual that I was planning to create an upheaval in my life. And the ongoing anticipation of a potential outcome created even more upheaval for me over those 18 months. Now, I think it's really important to say that this was just one area or one topic that created a great deal of emotional dysregulation for me. Other areas of my life were characterized by a high degree of emotional stability and balance. I was excellent at my work. I was focused on my studies. I was connected with my friend network, and I was engaged with my family. I was taking care of my physical health. I was in the process of starting my yoga studio. God, still so ironic. But this one thing, this one word caused me to act like a complete crazy person. And that's actually a compliment to actual crazy people. By the way, did I mention you will not get political correctness here? Some people are crazy. Maybe it's chemical. Maybe it's a personal preference. Some people act crazy. Some people have moments or periods of their life where they feel crazy. End of story. But this one word, Trump, could trigger a cascade of emotional radioactivity for me like nothing else. And for a while, it has strong influence over my overall level of peace of mind. I mean, I think I was pretty good at compartmentalizing things, or was I? Ask James or Justin. Here's what I can say about this period. Spirit, God, source, the divine, whatever language you use, was working overtime with me to show me what I was not yet able to see, but what it wanted me to see, and what it wanted me to see so clearly and so completely that one day, today, I would be able to record a podcast about how much courage it took to finally, truly, really see the Matrix, the complete media collusion, the corruption inside of marketing, and the clever messaging constructs. Because Spirit knew that once I saw it, I would never unsee it. Now, if all this Trump talk is making you angry, uncomfortable, or if you're on the verge of turning it off because you think I went from anti-Trump to pro-Trump, you're missing the bigger picture. And you're missing the main point of this episode. Courage. This isn't a podcast where I'm trying to convince you to see what you don't want to see or aren't ready to see. It's actually for those who are really struggling with members of the collective who are still seeing the world in manufactured black and white frames. Either or. Anti-Trump versus pro-Trump. Anti-jab versus pro-jab. Anti-DEI versus pro-DEI. Or whatever the current flavor of the day is at the time that you're listening to this. Until I started to hold the frequency of courage, I could not see how out of control my mind was. And by that, I mean how much of my mind space was being controlled by mechanisms and methods and masters of the PSYOP. It took an ever-increasing discipline of being brave in small things, in completely unrelated things, and in an increasing number of things. For me to reach the place where in 2019, I was finally prepared to find the truth on Trump. Or at least explore the Trump rabbit hole and find out if there was alternative truths to be found. It started with forcing myself to go back to 2015 and listen to full speeches that he had given during his election campaign. And then even further back to find interviews with him about who he was before the election, before The Apprentice. And yeah, at first it was probably painful. My ego probably hated me for making it listen. But all I can say is that my soul knew that it was necessary. I listened. And I walked my dog. I listened and I meditated. I listened and I scrubbed my floors in pure frustration as I started to see just how much I hadn't heard from the media, through the marketing and the messengers. I listened and I leaned into the soul practices that I had been collecting to determine what was truth and what was not truth. I listened and I was humbled, I was embarrassed, and I was angry. Not because Trump became this beacon of perfection or a picture of the savior of the world. That's just more illusion. I was angry because I was starting to really, really see the matrix and its mind games and the depth of the manipulation. And so I got angry. And then 2020 hit. And I got even more angry as I watched the machine, the media, the marketing, and the messengers ramp up again. Only this time it wasn't targeting one person. It was targeting the collective. But I'll save that for another day. Suffice it to say, I saw the matrix and the machine, and I saw the absolute mayhem it was capable of creating in our minds. I saw it, and I can't unsee it. And I could only break away because I stepped into the breakthrough frequency of courage. So it's no surprise to me when I encounter people who are being deeply triggered by Trump, those who still rely on the mainstream news networks to shape their perspective of the world, those who haven't educated themselves to the way marketers operate, And those who still haven't learned to see through the illusion of the sparkle and the polish of the high profile, highly produced messengers, well, those individuals will see Trump today the way I saw him in 2016 and 2017 and 2018. For me, Trump was one of the most potent red pills to break me out of the Matrix for good. If you watch the movie, The Matrix, you know that the red pill is the one you take once you've resolved that you don't want to stay in the Matrix anymore. Because once you take the real red pills, there is no going back. And it takes courage to take the real red pills. It takes courage to consider that what we have come to believe isn't truth. And this is why I now believe that courage is the breakthrough frequency. When the collective can hold the frequency of courage, the collective can begin to hold the frequency of neutrality. The people will cease to be triggered by Trump or any other highly emotional topic. The people will cease to be subject to the mind games and the manipulation of the Matrix. For now, it's as clear as day that those suffering from this so-called Trump derangement syndrome are not neutral. Courage. The breakthrough frequency. The breakthrough to what, though? Yes, to higher levels of consciousness on Hawkins' scale. But what if it's also the breakthrough frequency to this new age? What if the cost of entry to this new age is living from a baseline frequency of courage? What if the only way we get to enter this so-called new age is by being able to hold the frequency of courage? Not just being courageous in certain circumstances, though it starts to build there. I mean, reaching a place where we are holding the frequency of courage, even if or when everything we believe to be true turns out to be a lie. Aliens? No aliens. JFK, CIA. Will we ever get full disclosure? Do we have the courage to know that level of truth? Will we ever see the Epstein list? What is everything else in the grocery store if it's not labeled health food? How do we trust the mainstream media if it's owned by the same 6 people? What if everything is owned by the same 3 companies? Now, I don't have definitive truth to any of these things or any of the other things that are on my red pills and rabbit holes list. But what I do have is the ability to hold the frequency of courage as truth is being revealed and sometimes contradicts what I currently believe to be true. Holding the frequency of courage is the only way that we can rebuild our foundation and recalibrate in the face of every new level of truth as it gets revealed. The last of my original foundation shattered after I started to question what I believed about Trump. Suffice it to say, I didn't move to Portugal. Suffice it to say, I don't hold a black or white position on Trump. And the only thing I declare to be true right now is what I've personally experienced and what continually and consistently lines up with a variety of sources of the ancient knowledge. So what is truth? Quid est veritas? As it relates to Trump or where our taxes are being spent or a million other questions that are currently rattling the collective consciousness, the breakthrough frequency is courage. Well, there you have it, the first episode of a new season starting off a series of conversations on how we can harness the power of consciousness to navigate these age-changing times. If you found a few insights that resonated for you, I'd appreciate it if you shared it with someone in your corner of the world who would value this conversation. And don't forget to subscribe in order to share a comment with your thoughts, experiences, or ideas that have been sparked. The Substack space is dedicated to fostering my own creative expression, so you won't hear calls to action, sponsored messages, or promotions. But if you want to learn more about me and how I'm realigning my work to thrive in this new age, you'll find a link to my website below. Until next time, I'm Trish Murray, offering Sovereign Souls a guided tour of key elements driving the creation of this new age.